The fluorescent lights of Westfield High School hummed overhead as Christopher Miller pressed himself against the wall of the hallway, trying to become smaller, an impossible feat for his 15-year-old body. At 5'8" and 230 pounds, he occupied space that seemed to invite attention, the wrong kind of attention. "Hey, fat topher!" The voice belonged to Derek Matthews, captain of the lacrosse team and self-appointed ruler of the sophomore class. "Did you eat the cafeteria out of business yet today?" The year was 2003, before anti-bullying campaigns had gained serious traction, when casual cruelty was still dismissed with "boys will be boys." Christopher kept his eyes fixed on the speckled linoleum floor, counting the steps to his next class, 27 more tiles, until he could disappear into Mr. Peterson's English room. "I asked you a question, lardass." Derek's hand slammed against the locker beside Christopher's head, the metallic clang reverberating through the crowded hallway. Conversation ceased as students turned to watch, their faces a mix of anticipation and discomfort. Christopher's mouth went dry. "I brought my lunch today," he mumbled, immediately hating himself for answering, for playing along, for existing. "Oh yeah? Let's see what Mama packed for her big boy." Derek reached for Christopher's backpack, but a sharp voice cut through the tension. "Mr. Matthews, don't you have somewhere to be?" Ms. Rivera, the new Spanish teacher, stood with her arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "Like in my classroom, where the bell rang 30 seconds ago." Derek's friend snickered, but he stepped back with practiced nonchalance. "Just having a conversation with my buddy Chris here." He clapped Christopher's shoulder hard enough to make him wince. "See you at lunch, amigo." The hallway emptied, leaving Christopher alone with Ms. Rivera. Unlike other teachers who pretended not to see, she looked directly at him. "Are you okay, Christopher?" He nodded, the lie automatic. "I'm fine, thanks." At home that evening, Christopher locked his bedroom door and stood before the full-length mirror. He pinched the flesh that spilled over his jeans, hating every inch. His mother's voice floated up from downstairs. "Christopher, dinner's ready. I made your favorite, mac and cheese with the crispy breadcrumb topping." The irony wasn't lost on him. His parents, both overweight themselves, expressed love through food. Every accomplishment, every disappointment, every ordinary Tuesday was marked with comfort food. When bullies first targeted him in elementary school, his mother had baked chocolate chip cookies. When he came home with a black eye in 7th grade, his father took him out for double cheeseburgers and milkshakes. Christopher's computer screen glowed in the corner of his room. He'd been browsing fitness websites, reading about transformation stories, men who had shed hundreds of pounds to reveal chiseled physiques beneath. The after photos seemed like science fiction to him, impossible feats performed by people with superhuman willpower. "Christopher!" His mother's voice again, more insistent. "Coming!" He pulled a baggy hoodie over his head, armor against the world's judgment and even his family's concerned gazes. At dinner, his father talked about his day at the insurance office, while Christopher pushed creamy pasta around his plate, taking small bites when his mother looked his way. "How was school today?" she asked, her eyes hopeful. Christopher's parents knew something was wrong. His grades had slipped, he'd quit band, he barely spoke, but he maintained the wall between them, afraid that sharing his pain would only make it more real. "Fine," he said, the word a shield. "We're reading The Great Gatsby in English." "That's wonderful," his mother said, too enthusiastically. "I loved that book in high school." His father cleared his throat. "Say, Chris, I was thinking maybe we could join that new gym that opened on Maple Street. They've got a family plan. Could be fun to, get in shape together." The suggestion hung in the air, well-intentioned but laden with unspoken meanings. Christopher stared at his plate, shame burning his cheeks. They saw it too, how disgusting he was, how much he needed to change. "I've got a lot of homework," he mumbled, excusing himself from the table. That night, Christopher created a new email account and registered on a fitness forum under the username FutureFit2003. He posted his first message, "I'm 15, 230 LEBs, and I hate myself. How do I start changing?" Responses came within minutes, some encouraging, some brutally practical, all from strangers who knew nothing about him except the numbers he'd shared. One comment stood out: "The hardest part isn't losing the weight. It's believing you deserve better. Start there." Christopher stared at those words until his eyes burned. Deserving better seemed like a foreign concept. In his world, there was only surviving each day, enduring the hallways, the locker room, the cafeteria, spaces designed for his humiliation. He opened his journal, a black composition notebook hidden beneath his mattress, and wrote, "Today is day 0. Tomorrow, I start becoming someone else." As he wrote those words, Christopher couldn't imagine that 20 years later, those same words would become the opening line of his best-selling memoir, or that millions would follow his journey on social media. He couldn't foresee the New York apartment, the TED Talk invitations, or the magazine covers. In that moment, Christopher was just a boy in a suburban bedroom in Pennsylvania, surrounded by the remnants of his childhood. Participation trophies gathering dust, comic books stacked in milk crates, and a class photo where he stood on the end, face frozen in a grimace mistakable for a smile. He closed his eyes and made a promise to himself. Someday, he would disappear. Not by becoming invisible, but by becoming unrecognizable, so transformed that Derek Matthews and everyone else who had tormented him would look right through him on the street, never connecting this new person with the fat kid they once knew. What Christopher couldn't know was that 20 years later, his greatest challenge wouldn't be escaping his past, but reconciling with it, and that his true transformation would begin not with losing weight, but with a journalist's probing questions that would force him to face the boy he'd tried so desperately to leave behind. And we're live in 5, 4, 3... The producer held up 2 fingers, then 1, before pointing at Christopher Bennett, no longer Miller, having legally changed his last name after college, a symbolic shedding of his past along with the pounds. "Hey, confidence warriors!" Christopher's voice boomed through the state-of-the-art studio in his Soho loft, customized for his daily Rise and Redefine live streams. "It's another beautiful morning to choose yourself first." At 35, Christopher was the picture of polished success. Athletic build maintained by daily 5 a.m. workouts, tailored button-down rolled precisely to mid-forearm, and the signature salt and pepper beard he'd grown when a focus group told him it added gravitas. Today, he addressed his 2 million followers from a minimalist set, just Christopher, a sleek armchair, and a backdrop of Manhattan's skyline. "Today we're talking about rejection resilience," he continued, moving with practiced ease before the camera. "How many of you let one no derail your entire day, your week, your life?" The comments section flooded with responses. Christopher didn't need to read them. He knew exactly what they'd say. His followers were predictable, their pain familiar. It was his pain, after all, repackaged and reflected back. "I was rejected every single day of my adolescence," he said, his voice dropping to the intimate tone that had become his trademark. "Not just by classmates, not just by crushes, but by myself. I rejected the person I saw in the mirror, and that, warriors, is the most devastating rejection of all." His producer, Aidan, gave him the signal that engagement was spiking. Christopher knew which button to push next. "Let me show you something I've never shared before." He reached below the camera's frame and produced a worn photograph. 15-year-old Christopher, round-faced and miserable at a family barbecue. This kid had no idea he would one day help thousands of people transform their lives. He thought he was worthless. He thought he was defined by his weight, by the cruel names, by the loneliness. Christopher paused, letting the vulnerability land. In truth, he'd shared this photo 6 times in the past year, on different platforms, in different contexts, each time framing it as a never-before-seen glimpse into his past. The consistency of his narrative was paramount. His followers needed to believe they were being granted exclusive access to his journey. "But here's what I learned," he continued, setting the photo aside. "Rejection is just redirection. Every no pushed me toward the ultimate yes, accepting myself. The live stream continued for exactly 30 minutes. Research showed audience retention dropped precipitously after that, followed by a promotion for his upcoming Confidence Catalyst workshop series, priced at £499 for early registrants. Remember, warriors, your past doesn't define you unless you let it. Choose confidence, choose yourself. I'll see you tomorrow, same time, same channel. Rise and redefine. The red light on the camera blinked off. Christopher immediately dropped his shoulders, exhaling deeply as Aidan approached with a protein shake and his schedule. "Killed it as usual, Chris," Aidan said, scrolling through analytics on his tablet. "Engagement up 12% from yesterday. The photo was a nice touch." Christopher took a long sip of his shake. "What's next?" "You've got that journalist from The Atlantic arriving in an hour. Sarah Chen. She's doing the profile piece we discussed." Christopher tensed. Right. The deep dive. Unlike his carefully curated social media presence or friendly morning show appearances, a lengthy magazine profile meant hours of unscripted conversation with a professional trained to look beyond the surface. What's her angle? Her pitch was something about authenticity in the self-help space. She's done profiles on several influencers in your sphere. Aidan hesitated. She's known for being thorough. Meaning she'll probably dig into your background. Pre-transformation stuff. Family interviews, maybe. Christopher's stomach tightened. His parents had passed away within 2 years of each other, his father from a heart attack, his mother from complications of diabetes, while Christopher was in college. Their deaths had coincided with the most dramatic phase of his physical transformation, and he rarely spoke about them publicly. It was easier to present his metamorphosis as a solo journey, unencumbered by the complicated reality of family dynamics. "My parents are off limits," he said firmly, "and I want to approve any childhood photos they use." Aidan nodded, making notes. "I'll communicate that to her team, but Chris..." He lowered his voice, though they were alone in the studio. "This could be good for the brand, showing more vulnerability, more of the journey. The market's shifting. Authenticity is selling better than perfection these days." Christopher understood the business calculus. His brand had plateaued in recent months. The self-improvement space was crowded with younger, hungrier influencers willing to bear their psychological wounds for engagement. His polished approach, which had seemed revolutionary 5 years ago, now risked appearing sanitized, corporate. "I'll give her what she needs," Christopher said, checking his reflection in his phone's camera. "Just keep her away from Westfield. I haven't been back there in 15 years, and I'm not about to start now." After Aidan left to prepare for the interview, Christopher retreated to his bathroom, a marble sanctuary with a rainfall shower and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He stripped off his shirt and studied his reflection in the mirror, a daily ritual of reassurance. His transformation was objectively impressive. Broad shoulders, defined arms, the hint of abdominal muscles maintained through disciplined nutrition and relentless workouts. Yet some mornings, like today, he saw only the flaws. The slight softness around his middle that no amount of planks seemed to eliminate, the faint stretch marks on his sides, silvery reminders of the body he'd left behind. Christopher's phone buzzed with a notification. A direct message on Instagram from an unfamiliar username, Derek M83. His heart stuttered as he opened it. Holy shit, is this really Christopher Miller from Westfield? Fat Chris, man, you look completely different. Remember me? Derek Matthews. We should catch up sometime. The bathroom suddenly felt airless. Christopher gripped the edge of the sink, memories flooding back, the humiliation, the helplessness, the hallways where he'd tried to disappear. Derek Matthews, the architect of his adolescent misery, now sliding into his DMs like an old friend. Before he could process the message, his phone rang, the building's front desk announcing Sarah Chen's arrival 15 minutes early. Christopher closed the message without responding, pulled his shirt back on, and straightened his shoulders. He had built an empire on his transformation story. He wouldn't let Derek Matthews or a probing journalist dismantle it now. "Send her up," he instructed, his public voice back in place, confident, unshakable. Christopher Bennett, confidence icon, ready for his close-up. But as the elevator ascended toward his penthouse, Christopher Miller, the boy inside the man, trembled. Sarah Chen arrived with the studied casualness of someone who had interviewed celebrities and CEOs, but wanted Christopher to know she wasn't impressed. No recorder visible, just a small notebook and an expensive pen. Her handshake was firm, her smile professional, but not warm. At 38, she projected the quiet authority of a journalist who had earned her reputation through substance rather than viral hot takes. "Thanks for making time, Mr. Bennett," she said, declining his offer of espresso in favor of plain water. "I've been following your work for some time." They settled in Christopher's living room, a space designed for exactly this kind of meeting, with comfortable but photogenic furniture arranged to frame the Manhattan skyline. A bookshelf displayed his memoir alongside works by thought leaders he aligned himself with: Brené Brown, Simon Sinek, Malcolm Gladwell. "Call me Christopher, please," he said, leaning forward with practiced engagement, "and I appreciate the Atlantic's interest. Your publication has always valued depth over sensationalism." Sarah didn't take the bait of flattery. "Let's start with the basics. You've built a significant platform, 2 million social media followers, a best-selling book, sold-out speaking engagements. What do you think resonates most with your audience?" Christopher delivered his standard response: authenticity. People are hungry for real transformation stories, not quick fixes or gimmicks, but genuine journeys of change. Sarah made a note, her expression revealing nothing. "And yours began in Pennsylvania, Westfield, right?" "That's right." Christopher maintained his smile, though his pulse quickened. "Small town, typical American upbringing. Except it wasn't typical, was it? Your book describes severe bullying, social isolation. Unfortunately, that experience is more typical than we'd like to admit." Christopher recalibrated, recognizing he couldn't offer platitudes to this woman. "1 in 5 American children reports being bullied. I was part of that statistic." Sarah nodded. "You changed your last name after college, from Miller to Bennett." It wasn't a question, but Christopher felt compelled to explain. "Part of my fresh start. Bennett was my maternal grandmother's maiden name." "Was it difficult for your parents when you changed it?" The question caught him off guard. Few interviewers delved into his family dynamics. "My parents had passed by then, and I'm sorry to hear that." Sarah's tone softened momentarily. "Your book mentions they struggled with their own weight issues. Did that influence your relationship with food and body image growing up?" Christopher shifted in his seat. This interview was veering quickly into territory he usually avoided. "Every family has its complex dynamics. Mine expressed love through food. It was well-intentioned. You rarely mention them in your talks or social media." "I focus on empowering individuals to take responsibility for their own journeys," Christopher countered. "Family history is important, but I don't want my followers using it as an excuse." Sarah made another note. "Let's talk about your transformation timeline. Your marketing materials suggest a fairly linear progression from unhealthy teenager to confident adult. Was it really that straightforward?" Christopher knew what she was doing, looking for contradictions, complications, the messy reality behind his curated narrative. He needed to give her something authentic without undermining his brand. "Nothing worthwhile is straightforward," he admitted. "There were setbacks. After losing the initial weight in college, I gained some back during a particularly stressful internship. I experimented with some extreme approaches that I would never recommend now, but the overall trajectory was upward." Sarah nodded, seemingly satisfied with this small admission. "You frequently use before and after imagery in your content. Some critics suggest this perpetuates the idea that physical transformation is necessary for self-worth. How do you respond to that?" The conversation continued like this for nearly 2 hours. Sarah probing, Christopher alternating between practiced responses and calculated vulnerability. He felt like he was sparring with a particularly skilled opponent, someone who recognized his feints and dodges. Then, just as Christopher thought they were wrapping up, Sarah placed her phone on the coffee table between them. "I hope you don't mind, but I spoke with someone from your hometown, Derek Matthews. He reached out to my researcher when he learned I was profiling you." Christopher's carefully maintained expression faltered. "Derek Matthews contacted you?" Sarah nodded. "He had some interesting reflections about your shared history. He mentioned trying to connect with you recently." The Instagram message. Derek must have found Sarah after Christopher ignored him. "High school was a long time ago," Christopher said, fighting to keep his voice even. "I'm not particularly interested in reconnecting with people from that period of my life." "That's understandable," Sarah said, watching him closely. Though Derek expressed what seemed like genuine remorse for his behavior. He described himself as the villain in Christopher's origin story. His words. Christopher's mind raced. Derek Matthews expressing remorse? The golden boy who had tormented him daily, now casting himself as a regretful antagonist in Christopher's success narrative. "People change," Christopher said finally. "I wish him well." "He said something else interesting," Sarah continued, her tone conversational but her eyes sharp. "He mentioned that you weren't always the target, that in your junior year, when a new student arrived, overweight, awkward, you sometimes joined in, mocking him. A boy named Alex Garcia." The name hit Christopher like a physical blow. Alex Garcia. The transfer student who had inadvertently diverted attention from Christopher, a human shield he'd been secretly grateful for, and yes, occasionally, in moments of weakness and desperate self-preservation, a person he'd thrown under the bus. "That doesn't sound accurate," Christopher said, his mouth dry. Sarah didn't press, but her silence was damning. She knew. Somehow, she had found the one dark corner of his transformation story he'd never illuminated, the complicated moral compromises of a bullied kid, desperate to escape the bottom rung of the social ladder. "One final question," Sarah said, gathering her notes. "Your platform is built on the concept of confidence through authenticity. What parts of your story do you find most difficult to be authentic about?" The question hung in the air between them. Christopher had built an empire on his journey from victim to victor, from fat kid to fitness icon. But the full truth was messier. It included moments of weakness, of moral failure, of becoming what he had hated. "Everyone has aspects of their past they're not proud of," he said finally. "The question is whether those moments define you, or whether you learn from them." Sarah studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Thank you for your time, Christopher. My piece should run next month. We'll be in touch if we need anything else." After she left, Christopher stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city he'd conquered. His phone buzzed again, another message from Derek M83. "Talk to that reporter. Hope that was cool. Would still love to catch up sometime. For what it's worth, I'm sorry for how I treated you back then. I was a real dick." Christopher closed the message without responding. Then, after a moment's hesitation, he opened Instagram and typed Alex Garcia into the search bar. There were thousands of results, of course, but on the 4th page, a profile caught his eye, a heavy-set man with a kind smile standing in front of a classroom. The bio read, HS English teacher, survivor, advocate, anti-bullying, body positivity. Christopher's finger hovered over the follow button, then retreated. What could he possibly say after all these years? "Sorry I participated in making your life hell because I was relieved it wasn't me." His phone rang. Aiden, checking in about the interview. "How'd it go with Sarah?" his producer asked. Christopher stared at Alex Garcia's profile picture, at the gentle eyes of the boy he'd failed all those years ago. "She found some cracks in the story," Christopher admitted. "Damage control?" Aiden's voice was immediately businesslike. "We can reach out to her editor, emphasize certain angles." "No," Christopher interrupted. "No damage control. I need to think." After hanging up, Christopher did something he hadn't done in years. He called his Aunt Meredith, his mother's sister, the only family he maintained contact with. "Christopher," she sounded surprised. "Is everything all right? Do you still have the boxes?" he asked. "Mom and Dad's things, the photo albums?" "Of course," she said. "They're in my attic. I always told you they're here whenever you're ready." Ready. Was he ready to face the physical artifacts of his past? The photographs, the report cards, the tangible evidence of Christopher Miller before he became Christopher Bennett? "I might be coming to Pennsylvania," he said, "for the first time in a long time." "Your old room is always ready," Aunt Meredith said gently. "And Christopher, they would be so proud of you. Not because of your success or how you look, just because you survived." After they hung up, Christopher searched his contacts for his therapist's number, the real one, not the mindset coach he occasionally featured on his platform for credibility. Dr. Patton had helped him through the darkest periods of his transformation, the times when losing weight didn't magically fix the emptiness inside. As the phone rang, Christopher faced a truth he'd been avoiding. His journey wasn't complete. The exterior transformation had been the easy part. The harder work lay ahead, reconciling who he had been with, who he had become, and finding authenticity not in a carefully curated story, but in the messy, complicated truth of his humanity. "Dr. Patton's office," a receptionist answered. "This is Christopher Bennett," he said. "I'd like to schedule an appointment as soon as possible." The real transformation was about to begin. The train from New York to Pennsylvania offered Christopher 7 hours of limbo, time suspended between his carefully constructed present and the past he was hurtling toward. He'd chosen Amtrak over flying, telling himself it was for the scenery, but knowing it was really to prolong the journey, to give himself time to prepare. His phone buzzed continuously with notifications. Aidan concerned about his sudden disappearance, sponsors inquiring about upcoming collaborations, followers sending messages of adoration and need. Christopher had posted a cryptic image before departing, a railway track stretching toward the horizon with the caption, "Every journey forward sometimes requires going back. Taking a brief hiatus for personal growth. Warriors, keep rising in my absence." The engagement had been explosive, with fans speculating about his mysterious journey. Ironically, this unplanned, authentic moment had generated more excitement than his last 3 carefully orchestrated campaigns combined. As Pennsylvania farmland replaced New Jersey suburbs outside his window, Christopher opened his laptop and, after a moment's hesitation, typed "Alex Garcia Bullying Advocate" into the search bar. The results included a TEDx talk titled "From Bullied to Builder, Creating Safe Spaces for Vulnerable Youth." Christopher clicked play, his stomach tightening as Alex appeared on screen, still heavy-set but carrying himself with quiet confidence, dressed in a simple button-down and slacks. "My first day at Westfield High School," Alex began. "I was pushed into a locker, called every slur you can imagine, and had chocolate milk dumped over my head. All before 3rd period. Christopher winced, remembering that day. He had witnessed the milk incident from the safety of a classroom doorway, feeling that terrible mixture of relief and shame. Relief that it wasn't him. Shame that he felt relieved. "But the greatest pain," Alex continued, "wasn't from the obvious bullies. It was from the bystanders. The kids who knew better but stayed silent. The ones who occasionally joined in because they were afraid of becoming targets themselves." The words struck Christopher like physical blows. He had been exactly that, a bystander at best, an occasional participant at worst, so desperate to deflect attention that he'd betray his own values. Alex's talk continued, outlining his work as a teacher and advocate. He'd created a nationally recognized anti-bullying program, implemented in schools across 3 states. He spoke without bitterness, with the compassion of someone who had transformed his pain into purpose. When the video ended, Christopher sat motionless, the Pennsylvania landscape blurring outside his window. Then, before he could reconsider, he opened his email and began typing, "Dear Mr. Garcia, you won't remember me, but I was at Westfield High when you transferred in our junior year. I just watched your TEDx talk, and I need to say something I should have said 20 years ago. I'm sorry. I was the fat kid before you arrived. When the bullies found a new target, I was relieved. Worse, there were times I participated, hoping to cement my slightly improved social position. It was cowardice, pure and simple. You may know me as Christopher Bennett now. I've built a career helping others find confidence while never fully facing my own moral failures from that time. I'm heading back to Westfield this week for the first time in years. If you're willing, I'd like to apologize in person. Sincerely, Christopher Miller Bennett." His finger hovered over the send button. This email could implode everything he'd built. If made public, it would contradict the narrative that had made him millions. The bullied victim who transformed himself into an icon of resilience, never the perpetrator. Christopher sent it anyway. Hours later, as the train pulled into Westfield Station, Christopher's phone dinged with a new email from Alex Garcia. "Christopher, I remember you well, not for the reasons you might think. Yes, there were moments you joined the chorus against me. But I also remember the day you silently slid an extra chocolate pudding cup onto my lunch tray after mine had been knocked to the floor. Small acts of kindness matter too. I'm in Westfield this weekend for my parents' anniversary. Coffee at Murph's Diner Saturday, 10 a.m. Alex." Christopher stepped onto the platform, the familiar small-town air hitting his lungs. His Aunt Meredith waited by her aging Subaru, her face lighting up at the sight of him. As they embraced, Christopher felt something loosen in his chest, the beginning of a different kind of transformation. The following morning, Christopher sat in Murph's Diner, a greasy spoon unchanged since his childhood. He'd chosen a corner booth back to the wall, old habits dying hard. He wore no designer clothes, no carefully styled hair, just jeans and a plain sweater, his beard stubbled rather than precisely trimmed. The bell above the door jingled, and Alex Garcia entered. He spotted Christopher immediately, walking over with the unhurried confidence of a man comfortable in his skin. "Christopher Miller," he said, sliding into the booth, "or Bennett, whichever you prefer." "Miller is fine," Christopher said, surprising himself. "Here anyway." They ordered coffee, Alex adding cream and sugar, Christopher taking his black, a small remnant of his disciplined public persona. "I followed your rise," Alex said after the waitress left. "Not closely, but enough to recognize your face on magazine covers. It's quite a story." "Parts of it are," Christopher admitted. "Other parts I've curated." Alex nodded, understanding. "We all shape our narratives. The question is whether we believe our own editing." The conversation flowed more easily than Christopher had expected. Alex spoke about his teaching career, his advocacy work, his husband of 8 years. Christopher found himself sharing things he rarely discussed: his parents' deaths, his complicated relationship with food, the panic attacks that sometimes still gripped him in crowds. "I have a journalist writing a profile on me," Christopher said eventually. "She found out about how I treated you. That's partly why I'm here. My carefully constructed story is unraveling." Alex studied him. "And what are you hoping to find in Westfield?" "Absolution. I don't know," Christopher admitted. "Integrity, maybe. I built a brand, telling others to embrace their authentic selves while hiding parts of mine." "The self-help industrial complex," Alex said with a wry smile. "Selling authenticity while requiring perfection." They talked for nearly 3 hours, the waitress refilling their coffee cups with decreasing frequency as the morning rush subsided. Finally, Alex glanced at his watch. "I should get going. My parents are expecting me." He hesitated. "What will you do about the article?" Christopher considered the question. "I'm going to tell Sarah Chen the truth, all of it, including the parts that make me look like a hypocrite." "That's brave," Alex said, "though I suspect your followers might appreciate the honesty more than you think. Perfection is exhausting to witness. Humanity is relatable. As they stood to leave, Christopher asked the question that had been pressing on him since receiving Alex's email. "The chocolate pudding, you really remember that?" Alex smiled. "I remember all of it, Christopher, the cruelty and the kindness. That's the point I try to make to my students. Every interaction leaves a mark. Sometimes the smallest gestures of compassion matter most." They walked out together into the bright Westfield morning. Before parting, Alex hesitated, then asked, "Would you be willing to speak to my students sometime? Not as a polished motivational speaker, but as someone who's been on both sides, the bullied and the bully, the insecure teenager and the confident adult." The request was both terrifying and perfect, an opportunity not for redemption, but for honesty. "I'd be honored," Christopher said. That evening, in his childhood bedroom at Aunt Meredith's house, surrounded by boxes of family photos and memorabilia, Christopher opened his laptop and began typing an email to Sarah Chen. "Sarah, after our interview, I've been doing some soul-searching. There are aspects of my story I've never shared publicly, not just omissions, but active misrepresentations. Before your piece goes to print, I'd like to speak with you again. This time, no publicist, no prepared answers. Just the complicated, messy truth." "Christopher." He sent the email, then opened Instagram. He scrolled through his immaculately curated feed. The perfect lighting, the inspirational quotes, the carefully angled fitness photos. Then he opened the camera and took a selfie right there in his childhood bedroom, unfiltered, unposed, surrounded by the artifacts of his past. The caption took longer to write than any of his polished content ever had. "The journey isn't always from point A to point B. Sometimes it's a circle that brings you back to where you started, but with new eyes, I've been telling part of my story. It's time for the whole truth. Not just about becoming who I am, but about the mistakes made along the way. Stay tuned, warriors. Authenticity isn't perfection. It's honesty about our imperfections." As his thumb hovered over the share button, Christopher felt the familiar anxiety, the fear of rejection, of losing everything he'd built. But beneath that fear was something new, the possibility of genuine freedom, not the carefully constructed confidence he sold to millions, but the liberation that comes from embracing the whole truth of who he was, who he had been, and who he was still becoming. He pressed share and watched as his most authentic post began gathering likes, slower than usual at first, then with increasing momentum. Comments poured in, many expressing confusion, some offering support, others asking questions. In his childhood bedroom, surrounded by the remnants of who he had been, Christopher Miller Bennett realized that his transformation hadn't ended when he lost the weight, or built the brand, or became an icon. It was happening now, in this moment of vulnerability, in the terrifying space between his curated past and his uncertain future. And for the first time since he was 15 years old, writing in his journal beneath the glow of his computer screen, Christopher felt truly seen. Not as the fat kid, not as the fitness guru, but as something more complex and valuable. A flawed, evolving human being, worthy of compassion, not despite his mistakes, but including them. His phone lit up with a notification. Sarah Chen had responded to his email. "Tomorrow, 2 p.m., my office. Bring the whole truth." Christopher smiled. He was ready.